Welcome to First Strike here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. For the next hour, we're going to break down a very interesting fight night this weekend right here at UFC Apex. Angela Overkill Hill back in there against Mackenzie Dern. But before we get to that, we're going to have Nick Dais in studio, Lou Finocchiaro, Jordan Sherwood, and Reed Kuhn on the program today. Want to recap what we saw last weekend on First Strike? We saw Jailton Almeida. Good day for the Brazilians with Johnny Walker winning the co-main event. Then Almeida gets the sub in the very first round against Biggie Boy Jairzinho Rozenstruik. So really good outcome there for the Brazilian hierarchy, if you will, on that card. And then more news was made in the heavyweight division. If Jailton Almeida is going to be the next, of course, right now, Johnny Bones Jones is the UFC heavyweight champion. The former champion, of course, is Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou is out of the UFC. We've known that for quite some time. He signed today with PFL and then got a little chatty on Twitter about it and wanted to let everybody know where the baddest man on the planet stands. It's right across the street, as Francis Ngannou said, referring to his new organization. So that's what the Predator put out, that's where you can find him now. So set up to fight in PFL's pay-per-view super fight division. And then John Bones Jones clap back. Calling yourself the baddest man on the planet from across the street? Who does that? Lol. That's apparently what Francis Ngannou does. Joining me now to talk all things about this fight card and, of course, what's going on right now with the baddest man on the planet at the heavyweight division. Nick Dais does a great job in a Veterans Minimum as the owner-operator of that and the creator of it. Nick, great to have you back in studio. Before we get to the card, big news. It is big news in the MMA world today with Francis Ngannou, now the former UFC champion, going over to PFL. Are we ever going to see John Jones and the Predator get inside of an octagon?
I'm going to go 60-40, Dave. I think we do.
Oh.
I think, look, I am a traditional WWE wrestling fan. This has all the makings of long-form storytelling. I think they continue to plant the seeds for this one. And eventually, it's a fight that all the fans want to see. Now, I don't know the details, Dave, for the PFL deal that Francis has signed. But, man, it would be so unfortunate if we don't get that.
Yeah, and that's the thought process now with Johnny as the heavyweight champion in the UFC and Ngannou exiting stage left from the promotion. He said, I don't care what the promoters say. I am the baddest man on the planet right now. So time will tell. Very quickly, Jailton Almeida certainly made his mark in the heavyweight division last weekend. If you had him via sub, cash those tickets at about -10, -20 as he runs through Biggie Boy once he gets the fight down to the ground. What do you make of what you saw this past weekend?
I mean, that guy is a super freak in every sense of the word. Can fight at 205, at heavyweight, just absolutely ran through a guy who has been in there with the who's who. You know, I was looking at that line, Dave, and I'll be honest with you, I was on Jairzinho just because I felt like this was a massive step up for Almeida. But I also felt as if it gets taken to the ground one time, it's going to be a wrap, and that's exactly what we saw. So Almeida is the real deal.
Yeah, so I don't know that we're going to see the John Jones, Jailton Almeida fight anytime in the near future with Johnny clapping back at Ngannou, but this is kind of where we are right now in the heavyweight division across promotions right now. Huge news today as we talk on a Tuesday. But, Nick, let's get to the main event here in the strawweight division. Of course, Mackenzie Dern against Angela Hill. And right now, Dern is almost a 2-1 betting favorite here against Overkill Hill. You understand this, and we just saw it with Jailton Almeida against Biggie Boy, right? Striker against BJJ practitioner. So you know Mackenzie Dern where she wants to live. She wants to live on the ground, and we're assuming that Angela Overkill Hill would like to keep this fight standing here. Now, can she do that in a smaller octagon here at the UFC Apex for the better part of 5 rounds?
The one thing about this fight, Dave, Angela Hill is going to be up ahead on the scorecards until that 45-second mark, maybe in the 4th round, where it doesn't look good for her, right? She is a traditional Muay Thai fighter, point fighter, is going to win rounds. Not going to do anything too outrageous to put you away. She's the epitome of a decision fighter. But Mackenzie Dern, I think Dern, Charles Oliveira, and Gilbert Burns are the best BJJ practitioners in the UFC. And if Dern takes it to the ground, it might be a wrap for her. But the issue is that Angela Hill you might be looking at a live score of -600 Angela Hill as the fight continues. But then again, you might go grab a snack from the kitchen and then you look up and Mackenzie Dern has her hand raised.
Is this one of, I go back to, say, UFC 196 where Miesha Tate, it took her a couple takedowns and finally got that sub against Holly Holm, a fight she was losing before finally getting that submission. Whereas, yeah, this could be a live betting scenario here. When you look at, it's so hard sometimes to handicap women's MMA because Mackenzie Dern is now a mom. And since her comeback, from becoming a mother. You can look at the Marina Rodriguez fight and say did not go the way she wanted it to go. Is she going to be patient enough? Is she going to be able to withstand 3 potential rounds of getting beaten up with the hands in order to finally grind for that takedown like Miesha Tate did yesteryear to become champion?
I love that you brought that up because in my mind, I still feel like Mackenzie Dern is a prospect, but she's had, I think, 11 or 12 fights in the UFC. And I'm like, wow, when did this happen?
It just burst on you.
So, yeah, that is something very important to put into your handicap. And also Angela Hill is up there in age too.
Yeah.
But I think that the strawweight division now, it's kind of in flux a little bit. And a good performance from one of these two fighters could maybe put them in not exactly a title shot, but a #1 contender bout.
When you look at pathways to victory, and you can understand here potentially 5 rounds for the main event, that it is juiced to the over 4.5 rounds, that it would take time for Mackenzie Dern if she's able to get a takedown of Angela Hill. You look at the sub price for Mackenzie. Instead of laying the $1.90, would you look at the plus $1.50? And would you worry about playing the over just in case Mackenzie gets an earlier takedown? This fight could be over quicker than later.
The way I've already bet this fight is Dern by submission, Angela Hill by decision. If you look at the minus 155 to the over 4.5 rounds, I think that tells you if you are on the Angela Hill side, she very rarely, if ever, gets finishes. So that's the way that I've approached this one. I love betting fights like this, Dave, where it's path to victory. I always bring this up when I come on the show. I think Angela Hill can only win by decision, where Mackenzie Dern could put her away by submission.
I think you're spot on in that handicap there. Let's get to the co-main event here in the middleweight division here. Edmund Shabazian against Fluffy Hernandez. Anthony's back in there. And Fluffy is a rather fluffy favorite. Minus 240 right now against Shabazian. What do you make of this one here at middleweight?
One of my favorite fighters on the roster, Fluffy Hernandez.
Yeah.
He is a guy who is gifted in a lot of places, but I would say he's like a B- everywhere. And he's going up against Edmund, who 25 years old, Dave. That really jumped out to me. I feel like this guy has been here for a while, finally goes to a legitimate camp at Extreme Couture here in Vegas, training under Eric Nixick. And in the past, this would be a much easier handicap for me because Edmund is a guy that he's going to put you away in the first round. Honestly, he has about like 4.5 minutes of a gas tank, and then it gets really, really bad for him. But it's one of these fights where Edmund has been in there with a Brunson and a Hermanson, who are gatekeepers of 185.
Yep.
And Fluffy is a guy who, the longer the fight goes on, the better it'll go for him. And I do like Fluffy. I think the line is right. I don't see any value as far as this being mispriced, but there are some props I'm definitely looking at.
For a guy with gas tank issues like Edmund here, you look at the total for a round and a half here for a potential 3-round bout, juiced again heavily to 7.5 minutes over, minus $1.55. Is that Fluffy's strategy of, okay, because I know he doesn't want to go longer, I'll just keep him at the end of my jab potentially and try to kind of make my way through 5 rounds, get him into the second? Is an overplay a possibility here? Or do you think Edmund's going to be going for kill or be killed, and it could be inside of 5 minutes?
It could be. If you are on the Edmund side, I think that's how you should play it. But with Fluffy, we've seen him in the past where he likes to weather that storm early on. He could take shots really well. He's not a guy that is easy to put away. And I think the longer the fight goes, the better for him. One of my favorite props on the board is Fluffy Hernandez round 3. You get it at plus 800. That's just for him to win in round 3.
Yeah.
You can get a crazier number if you feel better about the submission or the TKO.
When you look and you go, man, what year is it? And you see Michael Johnson still on the card here, right? We're one of the former Black Zillions. That group is now defunct, obviously, against Carlos Diego Ferreira here. What do you make of Michael? Because we do have some older fighters like an Angela Hill on this card at 38, and certainly Michael's been around the block, introduced Justin Gaethje to the UFC many moons ago. Is he still potentially to you a guy as a live dog here? We know that Ferreira right now, a smaller favorite at minus $1.45.
Man, Michael Johnson, one of the weirdest careers in the UFC. I think he's about 500, but he has big wins, Dave, over some guys that are, either champions or fought for the title. This is a fight where I might be looking at someone to get slept. Maybe fight doesn't go to distance is something that catches my attention. 2 guys that are up there in age. We just saw it last week between Court McGee and Matt Brown.
Yeah.
One of my favorite bets on the card was fight doesn't go to distance, and it ended in the first round. And I think this one could be something very similar too.
Well, here's the amazing thing too: is Michael he's the young kid in this fight. Ferreira's 38, so it's like you go, wow, Michael Johnson. He's been 45? No, he's just 36. You're alluding to the fight last week. Those guys combined for 80 years of age, 42 for Matt Brown and 38 for Court McGee, and then went for the older guy at 42 with Matt Brown getting that first round submission, or first round KO rather. So absolutely fascinating to see some of these elder statesmen in the octagon this weekend. And again, if you think the fight can go the distance, which you do not, it's plus $1.45. So maybe they're picking up what you're putting down. This could be a quicker night here in a smaller venue at UFC Apex. Not going to be easy to get away. On a Tuesday, very quick, got a minute to go, Nick. Is there another fight on the main card that really stands out to you?
On the main card, not so much, but I love betting on some of these prelims.
Oh.
And my girl, Natalia Silva. I know it's going to scare you a little bit, Dave. Minus 800.
Oh.
Right? She is on an 8-fight winning streak, and she is one of the few women in that division that she wants to go take her head off. She hunts for finishes. Minus 150 for her to win inside the distance, as opposed to minus 800 for her on the money line. Also, if you're looking at it from a round perspective, the fight is expected to end early. So those two kind of correlate. If you like Natalia Silva, I would bet her inside the distance.
And I love the fact that you just shortened that price tag mightily by getting her inside the distance there at minus $1.50 instead of laying the 8-1 as the big favorite.
I won't bet 8-1.
Yeah.
I just don't do it. I'd rather take the minus 150. If it loses, it loses. If she wins a decision, no problem. But minus 800 as well.
Follow Nick as I do at Nick Dais, DAIS 10 on Twitter. Nick, always great to have you in the studio, my friend. And check out Veterans Minimum. I was on your show. It was excellent to be on. I appreciate you being back in here.
Thanks, man. Anytime.
There he is, everybody. Nick Dais. When we come back, Lou Finocchiaro going to Arizona next here on First Strike. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to bet the UFC. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You're going to be able to bet on more than just the main event. DraftKings has great odds on fight lines, total rounds, and futures for all MMA events. Eligibility restrictions to apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for all the terms and conditions. Rolling along this edition of First Strike, always a pleasure to welcome in the host of the BOUT Business podcast. Of course, he is Lou Finocchiaro. Follow him on Twitter as I do, at GamBlue. And Lou, I always say, like, we promote VSiN.com, and certainly we want you to be a VSiN Pro subscriber. And when you become a VSiN Pro subscriber, you write weekly articles on MMA and certainly the UFC each and every week. Tell the people about that and maybe what you got cooking for this week.
Well, first of all, Dave, thanks for having me on. The digital magazine is across all the sports, and I think the UFC is unique in that they get an article from me for the digital magazine 44 times a year because the UFC is marching through that long. And I'm tickled to be able to submit it. In each year we've done it, we've been wildly profitable. This year we're scraping right along at even. And later in the show, we'll talk about one of the releases that comes out. But that magazine comes out on a Wednesday, and so there's good information that often hits Wednesday early in the week for those that are interested.
I think that is a great way, certainly in MMA. That's why we try to bring you this show on a Tuesday here to get you ahead of the game, get you ahead of the markets before you get there on a Saturday and those lines have already moved, sometimes probably because of your information, Lou. Let's talk about that main event that we have out there this week with Mackenzie Dern against Overkill Angela Hill. And look, everybody loves to watch Angela do her thing, potentially 5-round here in a strawweight main event. Is she going to be able to stick to a game plan, which is move? It's a smaller octagon because you know Mackenzie Dern is going to want to try to clinch up and take this fight down to the ground.
Yeah, I think that's a great synopsis. Mackenzie has to engage, and Ange has to make sure that she doesn't engage. And even though it is the smaller cage, you put a couple of 115ers in there, and it's still plenty of room. I think that it's big that there's a couple big things in this fight. Number one, the fact that it went from 3 rounds to 5 rounds surely gives Dern more time to make such engagement. The other thing is that Dern arrives. We have to handicap fights, and the fact is Dern arrives after going through, and she's in the middle of a divorce. And that divorce she's talked about it with James Lynch, who is a combat reporter that we all know how good his work is. And so when I've seen people going through dire calamity in their personal life and their sports figures, I see them react one of two ways. There's the Wade Boggs way, where he would get on the baseball field and hit 300 because everywhere his life went, there was noise. But when he went on the baseball field, he could just play baseball and get away from it all. So does Dern show up for this fight focused like that? Or in fact, does trying to be a single parent with a young kid going through a divorce affect her in the fight? And those kinds of variables are such that it's going to make me wait longer to look at interviews this week to see how each girl is. But Dern, without all this baggage, to me, should be a favorite and would eventually get my vote of approval for a wager should she not be going through this kind of a situation.
Lou, it's fascinating because, again, I just talked about a little bit with Nick Dais here to begin the program. We don't have to do this a lot in men's MMA. Yes, sometimes they have personal issues, certainly outside of the octagon. John Jones has been a king of that, we understand. But when you're a mother, like now Mackenzie Dern is, we saw her come back after becoming a mother and didn't go very well against Marina Rodriguez there. And then you factor this in. That's why you're going to take a wait-and-see approach, because this is not just another normal fight week, it feels like, for Mackenzie Dern.
Well, but I don't distinct between mother or father. Cody Garbrandt moved from alpha male to Las Vegas and started his whole career anew, following his ex-wife with his child. So the damage that can be done is to either, and I know you agree with that, but you're right. Being a mom, and there's just a lot moving here. And so there's more than just assessing the physical prowess of each woman in this fight that's going to have to go into my handicap.
And Angela Hill, of course, is going to be thinking, hey, that's all on your side. On my side here, I've got to be about staying on the outside here and try to elongate this fight. You can understand why right now it's at minus $1.55 to go over those 4.5 rounds. I do want to go a little bit deeper down the card. On a Tuesday, Lou, if you had any fight that you really think that you have value on here on a Tuesday, could be on the main card or on the undercard, which one really sticks out to you?
Well, on Sunday, Dave, I released Andre Fiallo against Joaquin Buckley. You can see the pricing there, 230. Fiallo is plus 195, I see. I released him at 185 because I knew he had opened at 165. I saw 185 and I just got so excited because eventually when I see a price that's acceptable to me, I don't want it to go the other way and get beat by the nickel or the dime. I'm happy with 185. If he's 195 now, those may choose to take him now or wait to see if he gets even higher. But I think they got this fight wrong. Fiallo, they're looking at his last two losses, one which he was totally overconfident in against Matthews, and the other one against Salikov, his last fight. Salikov's a good quality fighter. And this one, Buckley moves from 85 to 70. I think that's really foundational to my handicapping of Fiallo. These guys are bangers. They're going to throw. I think Fiallo, who has the slicker footwork, I think he's the slicker boxer. I think he's the better striker. Buckley maybe has some more wrestling, but I think Fiallo is a very live dog here, and recency is affecting this price, in my opinion.
I love that. It's certainly a good number to get on a Tuesday, plus $1.95. Some interesting fights in the card. Of course, we have Michael Johnson on the card, one of the veterans, and he's actually the younger guy in his fight. Now, I'm looking at Karolina Kowalkiewicz back in there against Vanessa Demopoulos here, and she is a favorite, Kowalkiewicz here. What do you make? Because I think a lot of people think the best days of Karolina might be behind her. She's now 37 years old, but Demopoulos is 34, even though she feels newer on the scene in the UFC.
Yeah, boy, that's a challenging one. But I am of the opinion that even though Karolina looked so good in her last fight, I don't know that was really her. I know there was a lot of emotion into that fight for her. We'll see if she can bring that again. Demopoulos and Karolina opened a pick, so we've seen money go to Karolina. And so in this fight, I think I'm more interested in Demopoulos, and I'm just going to sit back and see where that number takes me.
Well, if she wins, she's going to jump in Joe Rogan's arms. That's what she does these days. When you look at a fighter like Lupe Godinez back in there, short notice to come back in here, and Britton Hess, our fine producer, says, boy, she loves to come back in short notice and be the favorite against Emily Dakota here. This is kind of what Lupe does. What do you make of this? Are you worried about the quick turnaround here to lay $1.50 against Ducote right now on the comeback bout of plus $1.30 the other way?
No, I think Lupe Godinez is a little tiger, and she's learned from taking short notice fights. And I think eventually she's going to stop doing it once she wins enough. And I think she's in favorable position here. I think she should be the favorite here. And it's her cardio, her activity, and the fact that I think that no matter what, the over under has got to be shaded over heavy. I think you can set your watch to the fact that Lupe Godinez is going to win the third round of any fight she's involved in.
All right, right there. The total is minus 335 to go over 2.5 rounds. So maybe if you like Godinez, you could shorten that price by decision, minus $1.20 there if you think it's going to go all three and hit the cards. Lou, very quickly, got about a minute to go. I got a couple extra minutes here. I do want to ask you about the Bout Business podcast, but before we get to that, I do want to ask about your Latifi is back in this card here against Nascimento here, and you're looking at a dog price here for Latifi plus $1.70. $2 if you want to back Rodrigo as the favorite. What do you make of this matchup? Because it wasn't that long ago that we looked at Latifi as potentially a guy that could get on a fast track. Those days might be behind him.
His soul was stolen against the Black Beast in Texas when he won a fight that they didn't award him. Mm-hmm. Now he's old, short, has profuse power for 6 minutes. I think Nascimento's too young, too big, too long, too much. This is a Nascimento finish more than likely, I think, at least from this perspective on a Tuesday.
Speaking of young and old, Chase Hooper is back on this card, but he's in a new weight class now, back down to lightweight here. And Chase right now, a small dog against Nick Fiore. What do you make of Chase? Because, boy, every time he walks in the octagon, they go, we need to see some ID. Should be old enough to be in there. Maybe he's starting to finally come of age.
Yeah, skinny little guy was fighting at 45, and he looked frail, and clearly the response that his body was giving him from getting hit at 45 said it was time to move up to 55. I'll be interested. This is a due diligence fight to see what he's got. I favor Fiore, the other fighter, just because I think he's a little more well-rounded. Hooper has to prove it to me over more time, so we'll be watching to see what he can give us.
Tell the people what they get, 20 seconds on the Bout Business podcast every week.
They get just more than that, and it's my final releases each week. Thanks for mentioning it, Dave, and good luck to everybody.
Absolutely, and again, become a VSiN Pro subscriber and check out his weekly articles. Don't go anywhere. Coming on back, we're rolling on. First Strike here on a Tuesday. There's a lot to bet on in the next 30 days, and for a limited time, you can subscribe to VSiN for just $9.99. That gets you insight into daily baseball best bets, NBA, and the Stanley Cup playoffs. Only VSiN Pro subscribers get access to a daily recap of the top plays made by VSiN show hosts and guests. Tools like our betting splits let you see where the money and bets are moving for every single game, plus a top VSiN experts leaderboard to view betting records, profit, ROI, and see which VSiN expert has the current hot hand. So sign up now for just $9.99 at VSiN.com/subscribe. We're going out to the great city of Chicago to catch up with our guy, Jordan Sherwood. You can follow him on Twitter as I do at Wood on ESPN 1000, the host of the unnamed MMA podcast. My favorite part of his Twitter bio is he is a MMA aficionado, and that he is. Jordan, great to have you back on, my friend. I want to get to the co-main event because I know you've got to play there, Edmund Shabazian, in that event. And right now, you can get Edmund at a pretty good solid price tag against Fluffy Hernandez. How do you see this potential 3-round matchup going at middleweight?
Yeah, I just like the price point right now that Edmund Shabazian is currently priced at. I mean, obviously he came into the UFC with a lot of notoriety and lived up to that hype, quite frankly, through his first couple of contests. And then he, landed into a little bit of a rough patch. He was kind of roughed up a little bit. His takedown defense was certainly questioned. And I think he finally righted the ship, and he finally looked good his last time out, albeit against a guy in, Dalcha Lamanhuda, who's, also had lost 3 fights in a row. But I think Shabazian is finally coming into his own at 25 years of age, extremely well-rounded. And he's been a respected fighter in regards to the Vegas odds. He was a pick'em against Imavov. He was a small dog against Jack Hermanson. So there's obviously, people believing in him and his ability. And I think against a guy in Anthony Hernandez, who certainly has shocked the world when he did against Rodolfo Vieira and is well-rounded and has got some very good submissions, but I don't believe he threatens Shahbazyan with the takedowns that have caused Edmund some issues over his last few losses. So at this point on Tuesday, and that's what we talk about, Dave, we talk about the value on a fighter early in the week. Right now, for me, Shahbazyan is certainly worth a look at that plus 230 price.
You know what's really fascinating to me when you look at some of these props, and again, the total here for this potential 3-round matchup, over is juiced heavily, minus $1.55 to get over 7.5 minutes. But look for the fight to go the distance. You can just flip it, and you get plus 220 if we're going to hit the cards. What do you make of that? Because normally you're thinking, wow, well, they're saying that basically the books are thinking we're going to get a later round stoppage either at the end of round 2 or into round 3.
Yeah, I think what you're saying then is as Anthony Hernandez at some point early in the fight or middle of the fight is going to get this fight to the ground and he's going to tap Edmund Shahbazyan. The issue that I have with that is that Shahbazyan, when he gets taken to the ground, he's beaten up. People are getting TKOs, they're getting grounded pound finishes, and I don't believe that that's necessarily in the arsenal of an Anthony Hernandez. And I think on the feet, Shahbazyan has proven that he's extremely fluid, extremely athletic, and I think, again, is evolving. He's getting better. Just like we're probably going to talk about with Chase Hooper.
Yep.
Edmund's only 25. Like, he's just going to continue to get better, cutting his teeth in the UFC. So that's why I think, again, plus money early in the week. Right now, obviously, as Gamlu always likes to put, I agree with the same thing. Official selection's not out till Friday. We got to see how the weigh-ins, because that's the first fight. But if you need to play it early in this week, you got to play Edmund Shahbazyan.
Yeah, you're getting the good price tag there at 2-1 right now for Edmund at 25 years young. Let's talk about another kid in the UFC. They're all kids to me when you're my age. But Chase Hooper now, it is amazing because when you look at him, you go, I can't believe this guy's he's not a veteran in the UFC, but he's starting to really get his sea legs here. He's going to move up in weight. And I know some people go, wow, he didn't look big at 145. Now he's going to move up to 55 to take on Nick Fiore. Fiore, a small favorite here. What do you make of Chase? Because he is the guy that everybody's going to be looking at. Are we overlooking the opponent here in Fiore?
Well, first and foremost, people have seen your social media of you posting pictures when you were 21 years of age. So you don't look too different from that post. But look, yeah, Chase Hooper, another guy that, cutting his teeth, growing of age in the UFC. He's now 23 years of age. He's rotated wins and losses. But here's the thing about Chase Hooper. Forget skill set. He's been outmanned in the octagon. Like, people are just outmanning him. He's going up in there against, men, and he's still kind of a kid. And look, he's extremely talented from a grappling standpoint and submissions. We know he's got very good cardio. He just has underdeveloped striking. And to me, at this point, you would have seen a little bit of evolution in that game. We haven't seen it to this point, which is why I think Fiore is the favorite. He comes in with a 6-1 record, a strong amateur record as well. He's got all first-round finishes on the regional scene. So the question is Chase Hooper going to rely on his experience in the octagon and his cardio strength and test Fiore into the later rounds? I don't buy it. I think until we see an evolution of Chase Hooper, if he's going up in there against guys that are a little bit more developed physically than him, and especially now, as you just alluded to, at lightweight, not at featherweight anymore, at lightweight, I don't like it. But again, I want to see what Chase Hooper looks like on the scale because he's going to a new weight class. Did he develop? Did he put on extra 10 pounds of muscle? That could be a determinant, flipping and going with the underdog in Hooper.
All I'll say is that when I was Chase Hooper's age, I was getting my ass kicked by grown men in the Marine Corps. So they did me no favors back at Paris Island and beyond. Okay, let's keep moving on this fight card. When you look at Karolina Kowalkiewicz here, certainly a veteran in the octagon against Vanessa Demopoulos. Demopoulos, again, it's not like she's a spring chicken here. She is 34 rather, and Karolina's 37 now. But it feels like Vanessa, in the UFC terms, is the newcomer on the scene here against the veteran in Kowalkiewicz. Karolina looked great her last outing. Can she put together back-to-back performances here against Vanessa?
I'd love to say it, but I don't think Karolina Kowalkiewicz has been the same fighter since she got knocked out by Jessica Andrade, and that was in 2018. I mean, Kowalkiewicz went through a 5-fight win streak where she looked disinterested. She didn't look like her mind was there. She was contemplating retirement, and I understand. Look, she had a victory over Felice Herrig. She looked great against Sylviana Gomez Juarez, but now I think, now we're back in the mix of real legitimate caliber fighters in the UFC, and Demopoulos is one of them. I just can't confidently back Kovacevic, even though she's looked good. So it's a fade on her. And look, I've been wrong twice because I've been fading her since really the loss to Andrade, and albeit she did lose 5 in a row.
Yeah.
But then she's won 2. So I just can't confidently pick her. I just don't think the game's in there. I don't think the heart's there. I don't think the mind's there anymore. And if those are the first things to go, Dave, you know that's not a good recipe for stepping into the octagon.
No, and if you faded her every time, you're still up 5-2 in those last 7 fights. So again, Kovacevic, hey, great. We'd love to see people turn back the clock, but that would be interesting if she can keep this mini streak and a resurgence going in her career. So I'm picking up what you're putting down there. When you look at Natalia Silva here, she's a huge betting favorite, the biggest one on the card against Victoria Leonardo here. She's an 8-1 betting favorite. I know we're not in the habit of laying 8-1 favorites. So Jordan, what's the other way to play this fight?
Yeah, I think you got to look for a finish. I think Natalia Silva's, looked good, as you just alluded to. Leonardo 1-2 into the UFC. It all beat it was against, Grotto and against Fior, who are very good competitors in the women's division. But look, Leonardo had been dominated by kick-heavy strikers, and when she couldn't get takedowns. Silva's a bigger fighter, kick-heavy strategy, packs a lot of punch. I think Leonardo is set up for another tough fight. Tough loss. I think Silva's going to get a finish at some point late in the first, early second. So I think the under at 1.5, even at 2.5, worth the value, and Silva inside the distance as well as the play. Yeah,
absolutely. Because again, we always try to tell people upsets do happen. You don't want to be on the wrong side of that. That's certainly your ROI is going to take a hit if you lay 8-1 favorites and one time they don't hit. Very quickly, we got a one-name fighter back in there, Machete. He is back in there. So I'm just going to say Borshev, so we can just go like Prince against Prince with one-name fighters here. Machete right now is plus $1.40. Borshev minus $1.65. What do you make of this matchup?
Yeah, I think Borshev has, again, a lot of people like him, like his style, his striking, his grappling improvement. I think Borshev is certainly the guy to look at, even though Machete's also looked good in his UFC. But it should be a very entertaining fight. Maybe a small play on the finish, a little sprinkle, as you say as well, one guy finishing the other. Because, again, in that 155-pound division, you have to make statements to go up and move up that ladder in the UFC. But I like what I've seen out of Borshev.
What do you make of the main event here? Very quickly, got about 90 seconds to go. Mackenzie Dern against Overkill Hill. Angela right now a solid dog. We understand the styles make fights. Angela wants to stay on the outside and try to pick her apart. We know Mackenzie Dern would like to get to a clinch and possibly get this down to the ground. Which way do you see this fight going?
I just look at Mackenzie Dern being able to get the fight to the ground with Angela Hill at some point. I know it's a 5-round fight. Both ladies have experience there. Angela Hill, again, has evolved as a fighter. I mean, look, we saw her debut at 0-1 or 0-0. I don't remember what it was, but all her fights have been in the UFC, and she's looked impressive. She's scored some upsets. She's had some controversial split decisions. But Mackenzie Dern has like the one talent above all else, and that's the ability to get the fight to the ground, get a submission. We've seen Angela Hill get tapped twice in her UFC career. I think it happens again. Mackenzie Dern's going to get an armbar. I'll call it out. Armbar finish for Mackenzie Dern.
Whoa! And again, so if you like her via sub, that's plus $1.50 for Mackenzie Dern. Would you beware of the under, or excuse me, playing the over minus $1.55 because you think that a submission's coming?
Yeah, I mean, I think both fighters are going to feel each other out. There'll be that process, and certainly both have gone to the judges. But let's get a finish. Mackenzie Dern's going to get a sub finish, so we'll go under at 4.5.
I see you rocking that White Sox hoodie there. So you're still believing on the South side.
Eventually, Dave. They're going to win one eventually. I don't know, but maybe tonight.
There he is, everybody. Jordan Sherwood does a great job, certainly on his podcast, the Unnamed MMA Pod, holding it down for Chicago. Going to D.C. next, Reed Kuhn here on First Strike. We roll on this edition of First Strike. Dave Ross here at Circus Sportsbook in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, going out to the nation's capital. Reed Kuhn is there. Always love catching up with Reed each and every week. He is the author of the book Fightnomics. You can follow him on Twitter, as I do, at the same handle, at Fightnomics. Reed, always great to catch up with you, my friend. I always think whenever we talk, because obviously you're getting into the analytics of it, there was a NBA coach, David Fizdale, that said, take that for data. If you want data for this main event, you've got a lot of it, certainly when you have veterans in the octagon like Angela Overkill Hill and Mackenzie Dern. What are the numbers showing you? Because it feels like stylistically, we know Mackenzie wants to get the fight down to the ground. We know Angela wants to keep it standing. Are the numbers showing you that that's exactly the way that the potential victor wants it to play out?
Yeah, stylistically, that's true. Dern is very good on the mat. We know that. I think her problem is that she's sometimes struggled getting there. Now, she does attempt about the average number of takedowns, but her takedown success rate is actually pretty poor. And I think that's because she wasn't setting them up. When she shoots from a distance, she does not do well. She only lands a very small fraction of those, like 8% of those. But when she sets it up with the clinch, she does a lot better. She lands, on average, she's actually converting those as a typical UFC fighter 40% of the time. So I think that's the thing that we've seen throughout her career. She finally evolved her game. She's using her striking a little bit more. She's using the fence more, setting up the takedowns. That is a learning curve I think she had to go through, coming in as a phenom and grappling and thinking that she could just get it done that way. That was what hit her in the face. She actually faced some MMA fighters who are, dual threat type people. And that's been the difference. So lately, I think she's been getting it. She hasn't always been winning. She's facing elite talent. But when you look stylistically at Angela Hill, she's also a very upright Muay Thai type striker. And I think that's going to work against her. She's also willingly going into the clinch. And again, like I said, the takedown success rate goes way up when you close distance. And that's true for all fighters, not just Mackenzie Dern. So I think she will get the opportunity. 5 rounds is a lot of time to work. Once she's on the mat, Dern attempts almost 2 submission attempts per trip to ground. So you're basically guaranteed she's going to be getting some decent submission attempts in. And I just think Hill is eventually going to get caught. So that's what I'm looking for. I lean Dern here. I'm a little surprised that my models aren't coming out with a bigger play on Dern. And I think that's just because her style has worked against her over the years. And she's had some lopsided losses, or just like statistically, she got outstruck by a lot. I think that's what's depressing the stats here. But stylistically, I actually do like this matchup.
But, it's fascinating. That's why I love talking to all of our guests. And certainly you just read my mind, because what I was going to ask you is, being a Muay Thai fighter like Angela Hill is, obviously you need to get close. You need to draw yourself into a clinch, which would play right into Mackenzie Dern's hands. Because she knows that, does she fight differently? Maybe she doesn't fight as heavy, and sitting down on her punches, and maybe she does try to use a jab and almost like a boxer attempt and stick and move. Could we see a different approach from Angela, or do you think she's going to do what she does, and that's what she likes to do?
If she's going to try to go down that route, I mean, first of all, she's 38, and she's been in the UFC a very long time, over 300 minutes of octagon time. As you said, big sample size here with the data. That might be asking a lot. Like, asking someone to change their striking style, it's like, switching handwriting. I just think that's a lot to ask of someone. But even if she does try to change it, she'll be out of her element. All of a sudden, her striking won't be as effective, because you go from that stand-up style to a long-range wide stance. That's your best play against a grappler. I just don't know if you can do that on a dime in between fights.
And again, the main event here, potentially 5 round. It is juiced to the over, minus $1.55 for 4.5 rounds. Because I know that you like the finishing potential here of Mackenzie Dern. Specifically, would you look at the sub price at plus $1.50 as Dern as a better way to handicap it? Or you can play the under in the event that Angela Hill might be able to get Mackenzie out of there if it stays standing, and get plus money that way, plus $1.25. Do you think both of those are good options?
Yes, I would go Mackenzie Dern by submission at plus 150. That's a pretty big swing from playing her straight up at nearly 2-1 as a favorite. So getting the plus money on the submission, like I said, 5 rounds is a lot of time to work. I do think she gets this to the ground, and she's one of those fighters that has so many weapons in her arsenal. She's going to find a way to get that submission. It's not like she gasses out on a guillotine. She has lots of options here.
All right, so that might be a better way to play it there. To Reed's point, instead of landing almost 2-1, you can look at sub at plus $1.50 to shorten those price tags, turn it into a positive. You look at Edmund Shabazian here in the main card here on the co-main event against Fluffy Hernandez, and Anthony right now is over a $2 betting favorite against Edmund. We've talked a little bit about it earlier with some of our other guests, the youth of Shabazian here. What do you make of that against a guy that's not exactly over the hill at 29, and Hernandez might be hitting his fighting prime? What are the numbers showing you here?
There's some interesting stats that pop off this page. When I was looking at this, I was a little surprised by a few of these. So first of all, absolutely a striker versus grappler situation. Hernandez wastes no time trying to go for submissions. He's pretty good at getting the fight to the ground, has had success there. Now, Shabazian, as a striker, is also used to having people try that game plan on him, and his takedown defense is decent. It's slightly above average. It's not amazing, but he has faced a lot of them in a short period of time, which is encouraging. I think when you come in as a striker, there's going to be a rude awakening once you actually face a grappler. Now, historically on this show, I am usually picking the grappler.
Yes.
I see a little bit more value just because of the way the price has gone. I mean, this is a price play. I see Shahbazyan as having a chance for a knockout. And there's a reason sometimes I call out poor head strike defense. When you're a grappler and you don't bother worrying about that strikes because you're so confident that you can just plow forward and take it to the ground, you're going to eat some punches. And these are middleweights. Edmund Shahbazyan does hit hard. His knockdown rate is well above average, and he should have a chance to test that chin. And if you're just going to, do a little bit of head movement and not really worried about it with 56% head strike defense, that is so far below average. It's a red flag to me. So yes, in this case, the price has gone a little too far. I do think there is a puncher's chance. Maybe that's a prop to play, because when you got a steep underdog with a clear chance to victory only one way, which is with his hands, that's a prop I'm probably going to go after.
And very quickly, you look at that here, because you mentioned the finishing potential with Shahbazyan, and certainly the hands, and maybe Fluffy if he can get the fight down to the ground. Sub for Hernandez is plus 210. If you do think Edmund can get the KO, TKO, you can get 3-1. What about the under in a round and a half, where right now you can't get plus money, and certainly not sitting at 2.5. They're sitting it at 1.5 for a reason.
Yeah, I think there's definitely finishing potential on both sides here. And so at middleweight, plus money at under 2.5 rounds, in the long run, that probably pays off. It's on the cusp. But in this situation, for sure, you got two guys that are very good at one particular skill set, and they are contrasting. So that tells me whoever gets that fight in the position that they want is going to have a lopsided advantage, and that's what you're looking for when you want to finish.
I love the way you handicap this, too, that the price point here for Edmund might be too good to pass up here, so that's why it might be a play, because traditionally you do like the wrestlers. The models seem to favor them. I wonder if that's where you're going with Joaquin Buckley here against Andre Fialho, because we know that Buckley might have more wrestling capabilities here against Fialho, who might want to keep this fight standing. What do you make of the solid favorite here in Joaquin Buckley?
Yeah, I like Buckley here. So first of all, Fialho has never attempted a takedown in his UFC career. Now, he hasn't been around that long. Buckley does have attempts, at least. He's not taking as many as the average UFC fighter, but he is more successful on the mat. So you got to give him a checkbox there. But also focus on just the striking. I think they will spend some time at distance, standing and trading. And Buckley kind of lives by the sword, dies by the sword. He has 6 knockdowns, but he's also received 4. But certainly he is the harder hitter. He is going to be a little bit rangier. He's the southpaw. He's also going to be throwing a lot more volume. Like, he really just goes after it on the feet. And so I give him some advantages there. Also, remember the head strike defense I just mentioned. Fialho is willing to stand and trade, and yet his defense is poor. Always a red flag when you're facing a guy who is as powerful as Buckley with either his hands or his kicks. So I think Buckley is going to test that chin at some point. If they are on the feet, I lean Buckley. Then you factor in the ground game, and then that's another checkbox on his side. So I like him as the favorite here. Is he bettable at that price? I'll have to see where it lands on Friday, but probably going to be backing Buckley here.
I don't know that we're seeing a renaissance, if you will, of Karolina Kowalkiewicz in her UFC career, but here she is again against Vanessa Demopoulos, and she is a betting favorite right now against the younger fighter. You got a lot of data certainly on Kowalkiewicz's side and Demopoulos now recently in the UFC. Are the numbers favoring the favorite, and do we think at 37 she's still a good play?
Yeah, it's not a huge favorite. First of all, I mean, this is nearly a pick'em, but I do see enough advantages with Karolina. She's definitely a more seasoned fighter. And when you look at the minimal fight time that Demopoulos has had, some of her metrics are abysmal. I mean, they're actually pretty bad. Like, that is a warning sign. I wanted to look it up before the show. Her reach might be the shortest reach in UFC history, first of all, which is an interesting thing. Now, Karolina is a seasoned striker, just a lot more time in the octagon, a lot more time out of the octagon competing at a high level as a striker. So I do think she is the more technical fighter here on the feet. Now, Demopoulos does have more takedown attempts. She's much more likely to try to go to ground, but her takedown success rate at 19%, not very good. So she might have an uphill battle there.
And not really a difference in the price tag. Kowalkiewicz by decision is minus $1.15, so you might be just more apt to play Karolina straight up. Reed, really appreciate it. As always, my friend, I want to thank Rob Moreno and Britton Hess for putting this fine show together. Cash some tickets. Enjoy the fights. We'll see you next week right here on First Strike.